I really related to and respected Paul McCartney. What a work ethic. He loves it. And I feel that way about directing. I feel that way about telling stories. Hi, I'm Ron Howard, and these are my absolute scenes for NME.
How many of you?
11. 13.
13. They're all alike. 13! Brilliant! Brilliant.
I thought there was a real urgency to telling this story, even though it had happened recently, and I knew that many of the facts would be in people's minds, but I also knew that there was a lot that people had not tracked. I knew that because I had thought I'd followed the story, and yet there was so much more. And the new facts only underscored all the more that the people who achieved this rescue gave the world something wonderful. Not only did they save these 13 lives, but they gave us a case study in what is possible. I knew there would be other versions of the movie or of this story told, movies, TV, shows. I don't care. I wanted to participate in letting as many people as possible recognize what had happened and what it looked like and what made it possible. And I now recognize that so many people were invested in this, and yet almost everybody knew they were probably going to be facing heartbreak. They certainly didn't believe all 13 could come out. They weren't sure any of them could come out. And yet they went forward simply on the idea that if they had to try.
Charles was watching. He was okay.
There's no one here.
You know, my friend Peter Morgan, who I've done 2 movies, Frost Nixon and Rush, that he wrote, but of course The Queen and The Crown and Last King of Scotland, and he's brilliant at taking these real subjects and creating fantastic, engrossing entertainments that are also very thought-provoking. And he always sums it up very well when he says, sometimes you have to depart from the facts in a detailed way to present a greater truth. Different stories vary. 13 Lives, Apollo 13, Cinderella Man, our boxing movie. These were very much, fact-driven. We really just wanted to share, almost journalistic. They were almost journalistic, those. The Beautiful Mind is trying to reveal several truths. But first and foremost, it's trying to destigmatize mental illness and allow an audience to understand and empathize with those who may be experiencing something as debilitating, disorienting as schizophrenia. We wanted to create the experience. So no one could capture John Nash's hallucinations or share all the episodes and all the experience that the real John Nash, endured and went through during his life. So what screenwriter Brian Grazer, the producer, and myself did is, focus on ideas that were true, that do reflect, in a very honest way, John Nash's experience, and also to a larger extent what it is like to cope with that kind of mental illness.
I'm a seasick crocodile, Mr. Grange. Given the choice between you, I'd take the seasick crocodile.
I think I was watching these great little half-hour Christmas specials that were all made in the very early 60s. Some of the animated stuff, like the Chuck Jones Grinch, which is this brilliant half an hour, was, I don't know how many times I saw that. Of course, in those days, you couldn't play things over and over again. You'd play it, you'd see it once, and you'd have to wait for next year. But It's a Wonderful Life, definitely saw that. Charlie Brown's Christmas was around when I was young. It was a great little animated half hour. There was, Frosty the Snowman. It was those little half-hour gems, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, as we're talking about it, more than the movies.
I could not hear anything. I'd be watching John's ass, Paul's ass, his foot tapping, his head's nodding, to see where we were in the song.
Definitely always a fan of the Beatles, but I'm wasn't encyclopedic about them. I'm not about any band. I grew up in Southern California, so I was a little bit of a part of that Beach Boys versus the Beatles thing. But the Beatles won me over, as much as I always loved the Beach Boys as well. And in starting to work on a documentary about their touring years, which is what 8 Days a Week was, from the vantage point of having been a director and a storyteller for decades, I was so blown away by the writing. So, there's the presence that I fell in love with, starting with the Ed Sullivan Show, of these guys with a different haircut and a great sound and girls going crazy for them, but totally infectious, records that you just would play over and over and over again. But what I began to understand was that even in those early records, even those first hits, the writing is just brilliant, And as they evolved, it became clear to me that you could be in any frame of mind possible within the, framework of the human experience, and there's a song they wrote that will speak to you very, very directly. And I don't care what mood, or what you're going through. That's the genius of the band and why their music is as relevant in many ways as it's ever been.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing, I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Tom Hanks was inspiring to me on that movie. We had worked together 10 or 12 years before on a comedy, Splash, and we'd remained very friendly. He'd acted in another comedy for Imagine Entertainment. But in working with him on Apollo 13, it was in the earliest days of Tom beginning to take on dramas. But what I really was so impressed by was his absolute attention to detail and knowledge of the moon missions, his passion for it, and his belief that we didn't need to embellish. We just needed to show it, just bring it to life. And I actually learned a lot from that commitment. That was the first film that I made based on real events. And I learned so much that when you engage with a subject in as granular and detailed a way as possible and convey that within the human experience in a relatable way for audiences, that's a very particular brand of entertainment that really reaches far and wide. And I was grateful for the lesson I learned, but that collaboration was a blast. And then we worked together years later on the Da Vinci Code and other Dan Brown projects. And I hope our days of collaboration are far from over, because he's just a great talent and a great collaborator. A scene like that involves a lot of physical effects as well, and of course it'll never be as dangerous on the set as it needs to feel for the audience. But it's a lot of hard work, and there's a scene like that it requires a lot of planning. So because of all the physical effects. That's a scene that uses storyboarding. On top of that is the shot listing. Talked it through and rehearsed it with Tom Hanks carefully, making sure he understood, sort of how the beats were going to work. And so then you go back and you just also think, what would Hitchcock do? How would you build the suspense? Which angles would you choose to make him look small and vulnerable in that situation? What can you do with the camera to let the audience feel what it might be like to be, in that situation and confused and panicked? And so it was a very involved sequence, and but it went very smoothly because we had spent so much time talking about it and prepping it.